Hey everybody, this is going to be the first of a series of videos on APA style. We're going to walk through APA style from sort of the general basics of what APA style is. That's going to be this video, and then we'll have separate videos discussing each of the sections of an APA style paper, specifically for an experimental or research type paper that you might write in a psychology course. So this one will cover some of the basics. The next video, we're actually going to jump to the method section, then the results, and then we'll cover the introduction and discussion and references and how to accurately cite references. So oftentimes when students learn a style, like APA style, they think about the references, right? How do I cite sources? How do I format the references section according to these rules that seem sort of arbitrary? But APA style is more than just references. We'll have a video on that. But in this video, we cover the sort of style, the overall style requirements for an APA paper. And this is based on the seventh edition of of the APA Style Manual, which came out at the end of 2019. Now, there's a number of resources available for APA Style. There are templates available online. If you just search for APA Style template, you can find one. For students in my class, I've provided a specific template for our course's purpose with some content in it that's relevant specifically for us. So check D2L for that. If you use Office.com or Office 365, there's also a template available there to help you get started. So a number of resources are available. These templates are really nice because they kind of get you a jump start on an APA style paper. It's sort of got some of the basics set up for you, and then you'll replace the content with your own content without having to start from scratch. Okay, so in general, when you're writing this APA style paper, make sure you got 1-inch margins on all sides, that you're double spacing throughout the paper. This doesn't mean double spacing sometimes and single spacing other times. Just set the whole paper at double spaced. 12-point font, and Times New Roman is pretty much the default. APA does allow some differences from Times New Roman technically, but it's just easier to go with the default there. Okay, so just grab the whole document and make sure that you've got these set up, that your margins are set, that your spacing is set, and the size of your font is set, and you'll be just fine. You don't have to mess with this throughout. In terms of a paper in a experimental psychology sort of situation or a research psychology sort of situation, they almost all contain the same elements to them. Okay, so it's a bit of a formula for how to put one of these together. And that formula follows this order for the most part. So you've got a title page, an abstract, which is sort of a summary of your paper. You're going to do that abstract at the end typically. So you write the whole thing and then do the summary at the end and tack it on there. But that shows up right after the title page. Then you have sort of the body of the paper, which includes your introduction, your description of the method, the results, and the discussion of your results. Then you're going to have a references section. And then after that, you've got tables and figures that usually show up on one per page. The rules have gotten a little bit looser in terms of you can actually embed figures into your results section if they're small. But for the most part, folks are still putting their tables and figures at the end of the paper. And so you'll see figure 1 at the back. And then in the results, you'll say, see figure 1, and the reader goes to the back to find it. And then anything else that you want to include besides these things can be included as appendices. They can be appended to the end. And you'll put each appendix sort of on its own section and label it Appendix A, Appendix B, and you can have any number of those that is necessary to communicate what you want to communicate to the reader. So this is the general order, and I have marked here for your reference where you're going to put page breaks. And by page break, I mean at the end of this section, when the words end at this section, it's going to be a break, and the next section is going to start at the top of the page. Okay? And the template should be set up with these page breaks included, but you might want to double check to make sure that you're doing this. So the title page sort of stands on its own, then the abstract begins a new top of the page, then the body of the paper sort of starts at the top of a page and just flows through. So there's no break in between introduction and method. And it follows along that line as we go through these page breaks. So the title page is going to be the first thing that you put together. You're going to center in the middle of the page this content. So you'll have your title, which is going to be 12 words or less, is pretty conventional. That will be clear and concise and compelling. And will be bolded. Okay. You'll notice that this is in what's called title case. So each major word, except for transition words like to and on, prepositions, that sort of thing, the major words are capitalized here. Below the title, you're going to have the author's names. So if there's more than one author, you'll list them all here. And then for student papers, if you're writing a student paper, you include the course number and the instructor name and the date. If you're not a student and you're writing this for publication, or you are a student and you're writing it for publication, there would be other information to include here, including your institutional affiliation, what university you're at, for example, and then some other information. But this is for student papers. You'll include all of this detail. So what makes a good title? Well, there's a few things you're going to want to avoid. Avoid writing incredibly long and detailed titles like this. Remember, 12 words is sort of the max you want to shoot for. But also avoid writing titles that are so short that they're not informative. Right? So the title needs to tell the reader what the study's about. So if I just say personality and Facebook, that doesn't give me a good sense of what kind of study this is, or what aspect of personality you're looking at, or that it's a study at all. It's just about personality and Facebook. So try to give me some information to compel me to read it. You certainly don't want to write something like Psych 4001 Experiment Write-Up, right? Like that might seem like a good title because that's what you're writing, but you're not writing this for a class assignment, right? You're writing this as if this would be something that would get published or presented to other people who might be interested in your study. So you want the title to be clear and compelling about what it's about. So you can avoid some of these things. Here's a couple examples of titles that are a little more informative than some of the ones above without being overly long. So immediate effects of televised violence on children's behavior. It tells me what the study is about. Okay, it tells me that it's about televised violence and children's behavior, and specifies that it's immediate effects as opposed to maybe long-term, like 10 years down the road effects. So I have a good idea of what this study is about. Okay. Here you see an example where there's a subtitle, and this is pretty common. So social comparison is a predictor of body dissatisfaction, a meta-analytic review. So the subtitle here that follows a colon gives us a little more context for what kind of a study this is. So you sort of have the compelling title here, and then the subtitle, a meta-analytic review, gives me a little more sense of what kind of a study it is. Sometimes folks use subtitles to make cute titles, to be a little more interesting, so like fudging the numbers, distributing chocolate influences student evaluations of an undergraduate course. Now you notice here they don't just call it just fudging the numbers, right? Because fudging the numbers doesn't tell me much about the study, right? So they have this cute title that draws my attention, and then they tell me what it's about. Okay. This can get too cute in the sense that the subtitle might be interesting or funny, like That's So Ravens, but not actually all that interesting or well, maybe interesting, but not all that um, informative about this stuff. Okay, so you're going to write your title, okay, and then you're going to start writing the rest of your paper. And this page has some resources for you in terms of, from the APA style manual, in terms of how you're going to set up the heading. So each section that you write going forward is going to have a heading to it to signal to the reader what the section is. And these follow a kind of level format. So the first heading level is going to be centered and bolded. Okay. And then the next heading level, and that means that this is sort of a subsection. So you've got a section of the paper being labeled by this, and then a subsection of that is going to be flush left, bold, and title case. So it's essentially the same format, but flush left instead of centered. And then if this section has a subsection, then those subsections go like this, essentially the same thing but italicized. And you move on. So how does that work in a real paper? Well, typically you're going to have the title be at the top level as the first section of your paper. The method, it will be described at the same sort of level. This is the next big section of the paper. So these are sections of the paper at level 1. So they're bolded and centered. Each of these sections has subsections. So these are 2 subsections of the intro, and they each get a level 2 header. Same thing with the method. These participants and measures are subsections of the method, so they have a level 2 header. And then you see down here under measures, there are more than one measure in this example study. So those are subsections of measures, and so they get a level 3 heading. Okay. And that's about as far as you're going to go. Sometimes you'll go to a level 4 heading, but that's getting pretty specific at that point. Okay, so you've got this document here and these videos that I'm going to provide. Don't forget that the APA style manual is available to you if you want to buy one of those, especially if you're thinking about going to grad school and doing a lot of writing in psychology. You're going to want to get a hold of that so you have it on hand. There are copies in the library at your university, typically, if you want to borrow one for a semester or for a period of time, I suppose. There's also a pretty reliable website called Purdue Online Writing Lab, OWL Online Writing Lab, that seems to be a pretty good resource for APA style issues. So if you are Googling questions about APA style, oftentimes it'll take you to this online writing lab. So you could go right there and check out advice on APA style. If you have a question about something, you can search that for answers to the question. And then the APA's website also has a number of instructional aids. So like they have a PDF here that I'll just click on that you'll see has a guide for how to write a reference. So there's a number of resources available online and at your universities to try to help you out with APA style. Okay, that's going to be it for video number 1 here in our overview. In the next sets of videos, we'll cover the method section and the other sections that follow.